In the second half of this DVD, we're going to look at a real-world example, and we're going to use this game-level model that you can see here. And I've designed this model so that it's relatively simple, and I didn't want anything that was too taxing for us to work on. After all, we're getting familiar with the tool, so there's no point in having some sort of advanced example for us to work on. As you can see, I've textured it already, which means I've already unwrapped the UVs and gone through the process of using those UVs to texture it. Now, before going through that process, I set myself a budget, and I said that I was going to use 10 bitmaps to actually cover all of the different elements in this model. If we look in the material editor, you can see that we've got the shaders that I actually built up from these bitmaps here. So you can see I've got front wall and tower, I've got right wall and tower roof, inside walls, and so on and so forth. There's a special texture here which wasn't actually created by myself, but was actually created using the render to texture feature, and that's actually to bake some ambient occlusion shading into a bitmap to produce lighting on the model, and I'll show you how I did that later. First of all, let's concern ourselves with the UVs that I created so I could actually paint the hand-painted textures that you can see here on the model. I'll just very quickly show you the different areas of the model. We have the front and tower front, which is this area here, as you can see. Then we have the right wall, which you can see here. We have the left wall and window frames, and I've actually put the window frames onto the same bitmap. That's just to use up the space efficiently. We have the roof and the remaining window frame. We have the back wall, as you can see, and we have the window interiors, as you can see here, and the door. We have the stairs as a separate unit. The inner walls, those are the walls between the main part of the house and the stair unit. The chimney is a separate bitmap. And we have the glass. Now the glass is a special case because it doesn't actually need any UVs. In this case I'm just using a reflection map to give us the effect of this kind of glass here. So in this case the glass didn't actually have to fit into any one particular UV space. So that's a special circumstance. And the last of our objects, which are the supports for the building. So they just support the front of the living area. So I'll just unhide everything again. So those are the main areas. Before I go onwards, let me just show you what I was telling you about the lighting. If I show the single light which is in the scene here, just unhide by name. You see that if I turn this light off, that our model stays illuminated, and that's because I have ambient occlusion based maps which are actually creating this ambient lighting that you can see here. So if I go into the textures and I select, let's say, the right wall and tower roof, I can go down to the self-illumination texture, and if I turn that off, you'll see it goes completely black. So it actually shows that there is no illumination in the scene now, and the only illumination is provided by the self-illumination bitmaps, which you can see here. And for those to work, I had to use one of the automatic unwrapping features that we talked about in earlier chapters. So I'll just turn the light back on. So we should really move on now and have a look at the unwrapping process itself. Now, there's one thing I'd like to say, and that's in the next few chapters we're going to be unwrapping more than one of the bitmaps in each chapter, and we're going to be moving along at a pretty quick pace really. And I want you to bear in mind that the way I unwrap the UVs in each chapter is not exactly the same way as I unwrapped them originally, because what we're doing here is we're unwrapping UVs and we're trying to show how you can actually lay out the UVs into each individual UV space so that you can then go on and paint bitmaps. But in this case I've already painted the bitmaps, so I've already defined a UV layout and obviously if I'm doing it organically, I'm not going to come up with exactly the same layout again. But that doesn't mean it's invalid. You could use the new layout to paint bitmaps and to come to the same result. Now you can obviously go on to each one of these objects. For instance, you can go on to the front tower here, and you can apply an Unwrap UV modifier, and if you go into the editor, you can get an idea of how the UVs were actually laid out. Now in this case, I've taken advantage of something that I was telling you about earlier, and you can see I've actually laid out the UVs for this element over in this area over here. And because it's one of the repetitions of the 0 to 1 tile, it has exactly the same result as if this was actually placed right here. You get pretty much exactly the same mapping, which was something I was telling you about earlier. So by all means, feel free to just go in, as I said, apply one of these modifiers and check out how the UVs were actually unwrapped in each particular case, and you can get a good idea from the way the UVs are unwrapped of the workflow that I used. So let's move on now, and we'll go on to unwrapping the front walls, the tower front, and the right walls of the building.